Terjari nyambon namjak nambab chiji jot nyomong rubnang nepatang hui takkana shibra sha sanje pannang jangtsu jangma la fran la nyambo maksang nang nak sir sa la khter tang niksong jechong tang kushir nang nar gyari shkatang vidmid ngammi shtona mbadak tang sa la rinchin gzigyot chirta var Lover nyumo chime driba yi semsin namla devjin kamdo ne. Chima pa mo chukchik driba maksang samji kushir dang. Rdungun barwe ngumbrok dongwe vidme sayi kamdang tsong. Sanjib jang tsnyang bokser dang khter dang nyacho rinchin shka. Alang dagam chok dang rinchin gzig dang chimit kamchong tsong ba nyed. Chirtirim dongun pa mi kong ne pa. 산동 김버 대비진 흑식바는 점에들 하이 먹든 민통니 칠진다 미르분 짐밥쉿 짐쉿바 대비진 대식 날미 대신 대식 날미 대비진 대식 날미 내는 라강 남라강 상집 견지랑 추 녀즈그데 집메드 심미 멈터 특지이 덕적 집발레나 조름 자다 Chirtir mirdik bab mazimlab devraq shiqbaani deyi kongni layi mignim ndabma aqchubshidhtar layi migim tongni ndabma aqchubshidhtar chigdang lasug jibirzuk sangdir nyambo zhugzikde tigje taba devjin jiba denan jombirim zad Chirtir chukchig tsukgur jantzini Kevim kebi titono nirwa yi tongni tabki tedag chukchig tsog gunnim jara rabda shiba vjin jangchung chimbo gumkin kyanji ni rikkim jangtsi tangja tegzigni deyib jiba jangma tangja wa khtanni rabda pongrib shiba yin pongrim zaba yin chirtirib jangtsi chungchig shiba chakchig tongzib jangtsi tongnira yi jangma tedag sarde chirtirin dopa vjandab jangtsi shawa shid devjin lijin la layo da zigmit bayi shibi jangtsi tang nyomong jangma tangja tenjum balam kibi gyarwa shkewa vjin chirtir wabdan zhiyi nyambo na mirnim gini shapir manjir vya ze suk tondag nirwa kanyin ba dedag gini shfinni devjin shtar Devjin semchil layo nyumong ki chima tangzhe gyarwa chikchit nyumong chima nzheli machurwa dechir gyarmzik chiksim dima shid. Chirtir salab chawo ni nzhiyi nyambo rinli mafshung chama jan lagbar mabjib mirnam ki ni fkyabshab zawa jimbur manjir tar Devjin semchil layong chuji wangshig nyumong wole machurli nyomong tribi nyengi rola chuji gawi rostirin jirwa man
Today our class is on the Uttara Tantra Shastra. Next Saturday we will have the analogues of Confucius, and the week after, on the 26th of October, we'll have another class on the Uttara Tantra Shastra. And then we will have a break. So the October 26th would be our last class for this year, and next year our classes will resume maybe around February or March if I were to still be alive. My bottom line is if I were to be still alive, I will continue to give teachings. So I think that's a kind of aspiration for yourself as well. Whatever classes you're listening to, you should make such aspiration that whatever obstacles or whatever favorable conditions that there are, you should make the aspiration that you will finish listening that particular class, that particular Dharma class. And I think it should be our principle and it should be our aspiration, really. What I notice is that a great number of our Sangha members, let them be sitting in the shrine hall or the ones who are listening to it through internet, through different means, I think they are very persistent. And I really feel that it is mostly because the favorable conditions are gathered and are maturing. That's why you are listening and persisting in listening to it. There are the ones who live in big cities who have a really busy schedule, very packed lifestyle. And despite all these kind of conditions, they still persist all the way through from the first class to the very end. And for these group of people, I myself rejoice. In fact, the opportunity of listening to the Dharma is very precious, and I think we should all cherish such opportunity. Especially this time during the classes on the Uttara Tantra Shastra, where the teachings are on the Buddha nature. It is quite important to understand what the Buddha nature is. If not, then it's such a pity. Therefore, with this kind of cherishing mind, we should receive the teachings. And now let's continue with today's class, where we're going to talk about the 9 kinds of metaphors. Previously, we've talked about the 10 aspects, where it talks about the nature, the cause, the merits, the fruition, and the function, and its categorizations, and all pervasiveness, and so on. The 10 kinds of aspects of Buddha nature within 8 outlines. And through the teachings, I think lots of people started to have a new understanding and a new view of Buddha nature. I think majority of you probably only know that all sentient beings have the intrinsic Buddha nature, but why is that so? I think lots of people do not understand. Therefore, through the blessings and through the teachings and through all of these kind of classes, you should be able to understand the Buddha nature in a much deeper way. And based on my observation, I really see that a majority of you are very serious about this learning and very careful about this learning and really delve in depth with this learning. And I myself really rejoice and praise all of you who have such a kind of intention to study. I think without faith and trust and interest and curiosity in the Dharma, then it doesn't matter how much I force you to listen, I think you still skip classes. There's really nothing I can do to force you to listen to classes, but you are here. It shows that you have faith in the correct Dharma. which is really important because faith is like a gate. You have to step onto the correct path through that gate. And without such kind of faith, you won't be able to step onto the correct path to start with. And if you do not have the faith throughout the teaching, then you won't be able to finish the path. You probably give up halfway through. So faith is, in fact, quite important to have confidence in the Dharma. Next one is the summary of the meaning of the explanation. So it says that in this way, the nature of the victorious one is expressed by the tenfold presentation, all the way. The ones that we've already studied, in fact, it is this sentence is a summary that summarizes that previously we've studied the tenfold presentation. I think if you were to only study it once or read it once, is definitely not enough. You have to then go back to read it again and again, study it again and again, and refer to different books so that you will develop certainty in the view and stability in the view. Because you cannot develop faith and confidence in the Dharma and in the Tathagata, the Buddha nature, through only listening to one class. You cannot do that. Therefore, you have to go back to it again and again. Next one, then it starts a new section of in terms of the content. So it says that this Tathagata abides within the shroud of afflictions. So should be understood through the following 9 examples or 9 analogies. There are the 9 analogies that will be explained afterwards. So this Buddha nature is then shrouded by the afflictions, or covered by the afflictions, or closed in the cover of afflictions. And later on, we'll understand how it is through the 9 examples. The 9 examples, in fact, came from the Sutra of Tathagata. And I really hope those of you, if you were to have time to read this Tathagata Sutra. It's not thick, it's actually quite concise, so it won't take you too much time. I believe it was translated by Master Dhammapada in Xijing dynasty, but that translation is already lost, and it is nowhere to be found. And then in the Dongjing dynasty, it was later translated by Buddhabhadra into Chinese language, that is. In fact, in this Tathagata Sutra, the teachings are not too long, so it doesn't take too long for you to read it. And mainly the content is all around the 9 kinds of examples or 9 analogies. Another sutra I recommend you to read and to make reference to is the Sutra of Neither Increase Nor Decrease. So over here, through the 9 kinds of examples, it points out that the Buddha nature is in fact hidden. We can understand it through the teachings, through the previous classes, or through the 9 kinds of examples. And if sentient beings do not understand the Buddha nature is covered or is hidden, then sentient beings would not persevere to recognize or to attain enlightenment. According to Master Jizang's brief overview of the Lotus Sutra, he said that even if with great diligence one practices the Bodhi path, if possessing no Buddha nature, one will never become a Buddha. Without Buddha nature, then any kinds of diligence in practice would be of no use. Therefore, it is quite important to understand that we all obtain a Buddha nature within. We all have Buddha nature, but Buddha nature is covered by different layers of afflictions, different layers of ignorance, and different layers of kleshas. But the Buddha nature that we have is already enlightened, is already awakened. And from such aspect, in fact, there is really no person that is hopeless. Even if such a person is really evil, but such kind of being is only temporarily covered by such evilness, and the nature of such sentient beings is not evil at all. There's no being like that that has the evil nature, including Mara or beings who've harmed lots of sentient beings. In fact, their mind, they all have Buddha nature, including Devadatta. He received the prediction from the Buddha that he will also attain Buddhahood and be enlightened as well. So for beings who have lots of afflictions, who have rather lack of merit, it is in fact all temporary. They're just lost temporarily. However, they all have the seed of enlightenment, and they all have the function or have the potential to be enlightened. Through different other teachings, we often talk about the 9 kinds of examples that is taught through Uttara Tantra Shastra. We often quote from the Uttara Tantra Shastra about the 9 kinds of examples, and today we will get into the 9 kinds of examples. And now we get into the 5th one, where then it talks about how, first of all, concise explanation, and second of all is what is obscured and what causes obscuration, alternatively expressed through an example followed by its meaning. And the first one is a concise explanation. It says that just like a Buddha in a decaying lotus. And the second one talks about example and meaning expressed separately, and then detailed explanation. It has the 3 parts within. So the first one, when it is the within the concise explanation, the first one is the obscuration and what caused the obscuration, alternatively expressed through examples of followed by its meanings. It goes like this. Just like a Buddha in a decaying lotus. I think I'm not going to recite it. I'm going to just directly explain it to you instead of just reading. So it says that if there's a decaying lotus, that the petals are already withering, and inside such a kind of a lotus flower, there is a Buddha who is really beautiful to look at and is absolutely marvelous. That's the first one. And the second one is the swarm of bees swarms about the honey, which is full of nutrition and really delicious. That's the second. And the third one is as within the husks, there are grains that is the essence of the crop. The Chinese translation of the husk is a little different, but what it means in general is the inedible part of the grain that covers the grain. That's the third example. And the fourth example is amidst of filth, there's a piece of gold. Just like how within the filth there's the pure gold that's hidden. And the fifth one is just like a precious treasure that is hidden under the ground of a poor man's house. And the fifth one is just like a shoot of a mighty tree grows and increases from a tiny seed. Within a tiny seed or tiny fruit, in fact, it has the sprout or the potential to be grown into a mighty tree. The next one is a statue of a Buddha that is wrapped in a tattered rag. It's almost like how people nowadays would make a new statue, but they would try to make it look quite antique. And then on top of that, they will wrap the statue in tattered rag, and it would say that this is antique. It costs thousands of dollars. Or the Tanka paintings, just like the Tanka paintings would print out the old paintings and then make it look like almost antique. So you should be aware of all different kind of technologies that makes the new paintings like the old, or makes the novices painting like the master's painting. In Nepal, they said that they have really old statues, and because it is sprayed and painted in the antique way, and it's very difficult to tell whether the painting is genuine antique or not. I'm sidetracking here. This is rather related to business than Buddha nature. But I think it's quite important to point out to those who have great confidence, but not much of wisdom, especially for those of people who have great merit and lots of money. There were people who gifted me with really expensive tankas. I'm not sure whether you understand what tanka paintings are. I appreciate your intention. However, it's very difficult to say whether it is worth it or not. So over here it says that the special and very precious statues are wrapped in tattered rags. It's very difficult to tell whether there's a precious statue that is inside the rag or not. Especially during the Cultural Revolution time, we usually would wrap up and hide the statues in tattered rags. The next one is that just like a universal ruler of mankind in the womb of a woman of miserable appearance. By the appearance, the woman probably is very ugly looking and have a low social status and wears really ragged clothing. But inside of her womb, there is the universal ruler that is going to be born. And the next one is that just as the time when the mold is removed, a precious image is present under a layer of clay. So the 9 examples are given, and then it says that this Buddha element, this Buddha nature, abides within all sentient beings, obscured by defilement of adventitious poisons or adventitious afflictions. And as previously, what we've studied is that adventitious means that they are guests. They will just visit and will eventually leave your house because they are not the host, rather they're the guests. So adventitious means that they will then stay for a bit, but eventually will leave. And it shows that the sentient beings have the Buddha nature within, but it is hidden. According to the Avatamsaka Sutra, it says that how wondrous and how strange, how is it that all these sentient beings have the knowledge of Buddha, but in their folly and confusion do not know it or perceive it? In the flight of the Garuda, there are also lots of how wondrous or imaho inside the teachings. And over here in the Avatamsaka Sutra, it also said that how wondrous. It's so rare and it's very strange. All the sentient beings, they already have the Buddha nature. Even if you don't know other people have the Buddha nature, at least you should know that you have the Buddha nature. But the sentient beings are very confused. They do not even know that they have it. In fact, you have the Buddha nature during the day, at night. In fact, it is always there without departing, never departed you. But it is hidden, therefore, you do not see it. So this time, through our studying, I really hope that you could understand and gain confidence of your own Buddha nature. The next one is both example and the meaning expressed separately. According to Japsoge, he said that there are 9 analogies. And since we've already talked about the in fact, 18 analogies. Previously, we said that there are 8 examples, and accordingly, there are 18 analogies. So let's look at it. First of all, the defilements corresponds to the lotus, the insects, the husk, the filth, the earth, the fruit, the tethered rag, the pregnant women, and the direly vexed with burning suffering, the clay. And these are the ones could cover up our Buddha nature. And the next one, next 9, talks about the Buddha nature. There are the analogies of Buddha nature that is hidden. The first one is the withered lotus. Second one, the bees. Third one, the husk. And fourth one, the feces. And fifth one, the earth. And sixth, the fruit or the seed. And seventh is the tethered rag. And eighth one is the pregnant woman. The ninth one is direly vexed with burning suffering, and the clay. It is the clay. And what do they cover up then? What are they hiding or cover under? What is covered underneath under all of those stated above then? The first one is the Buddha. The second one is the honey. The third one is the grain, because the husks would then cover the grain, the essence of the crop, and the feces covers the gold. The earth covers the treasure that is underneath, and the fruit or the seed is corresponds with Nyagaroda tree, which is a magnificent tree, a really big tree. And then the next one is the pregnant woman who is direly vexed with burning suffering, covers the covers the supreme ruler, and then tattered clothing covers the precious statue, and the clay covers precious image. So these are the 18 analogies. The first 9 talks about what covers, and the next 9 talks about the precious Buddha nature. It points to the precious Buddha nature that is covered by the previous 9 analogies. I think lots of people, they had lots of confusions before about what is Buddha nature. So previously, the 10 kinds of aspects and the 9 examples should be able to point out what the Buddha nature is for you. In Tibetan Buddhism, we often talk about the 10 kinds of sutras on the Tathagata on the Buddha nature. I can't give you the whole list, but I can give you a few lists. The first one is the Avatamsaka Sutra, and then the Tathagata Patisambhava Nirdasa Sutra, and then within the Tripitaka Sutra, there's the Srimala Sutra and the Parinirvana Sutra, as well as Great Cloud Sutra and the Dharma Drum Sutra. Within all of these sutras, those all talk about the Buddha nature. For those of you who do not understand or who do not really know about the third turning of the Dharma teachings, then I think it could be quite confusing to you. And because the third turning of the wheel of the Dharma is rather quite profound, and it is very difficult to understand, but I think through the pith instructions given by Mipa Rinpoche and so on, the teachings are very clear. Also, according to Jonangpa's teachings, some of their shastras and commentaries are also very easy to understand, and they talk quite a bit about the Buddha nature. So Nyingmapa and Jonangpa's, they have great descriptions about the Buddha nature, and they're taught in a pith instruction format. So over here it talks about how is it that everyone has Buddha nature through the 10 aspects and 9 examples. There are people nowadays would refuse the fact of rebirth and karma. I think for such kind of people, they live in such a pitiful view that they feel that their life is just like a withered flower. They will live for one season and die after. That's their view of life, and this kind of view would lead their life as just seize the day because you probably won't have a next day tomorrow. They don't have any kind of long aspiration or grand goals or big inspirations. They only plan for very temporary things in their life. But life doesn't work like that. we ourselves as Mahayana practitioners, we should have a long goal. We should have the goal to attain enlightenment, to gain complete awakening, and to liberate all sentient beings. That's how we should look at our lifespan and how we should look at our aspiration. Next one is the detailed explanations that has the 9 kinds of explanations based on the 9 examples. In the detailed explanations, it has also 9 parts. And the first one, in fact, we've already talked about the 9 examples, and from here we will then give the detailed explanations. And within each one of the explanations, it has also 3 aspects. One is the actual example, second one is the meaning, and then the third one is the combination. This is my new book, translated into Korean language. The Vajrakata Diamond Sutra, commentary on Diamond Sutra, that is translated into Korean language now. This professor translated for me. In fact, we had a great conversation together, and I really felt that he is quite a great scholar. He's very careful in terms of wording, and he's very detail-orientated. I personally feel that Buddhists have lots of faith, but scholarship and faith are very different. Recently, what I felt about how our studying, how our Sangha members who want to dedicate time into certain areas of sutras and shastras, I really hope that you should study the formats of writing essays. And from what I noticed so far is that the essays and the papers, I think you talk quite a bit about stories, talk about your feelings, your dreams, these kind of things. I think those could be called articles or could be called your writings, your essays, but these are not really scholarly papers. As Buddhists, yes, you can then increase your emotional, you can increase the emotional feelings of your audience by using personal stories and so on. But if you were to write a scholar paper, then you have to find and recite from different references. For example, I just quoted from the Tathagata Sutra. Then you should look into the different kinds of translations, from what time it was written, what dynasty was it translated, and who was the translator, and what are the different kinds of differences between the different translators' versions, and then use your own wisdom and your own knowledge. Then you should differentiate. You should then write based on those kind of facts. I think if you were to only write your own stories and your own insights and your own dreams, then we can call it the collections of stories based on people's insights, but they're not scholar papers. I really hope that professors, teachers, and people who have received such kind of information to train or to give a workshop to our Sangha members so that they will gain more understanding about how to present international scholar papers to others. You cannot then just say that because my teacher is an enlightened Vajra master and based on what he said through his Vajra language, then I personally feel that this is so and so. I think this is really not the way of presenting a scholar paper. And when I conversed with this Korean professor, at that time of giving the teaching of a commentary of Vajrachitika, the Diamond Sutra, I contemplated upon this, and I thought I cannot and should not quote too much about the scholar facts and scientific facts, because at that time the audience don't really want to listen to that. So the professor raised the questions that he had read through many different versions of the Diamond Sutra, and he felt that different teachers, different great masters give teachings from various aspects, but my perspective is different and is needed for the audience. Therefore, he then translated my book on the commentary of the Diamond Sutra. Originally, when I first went to the university of the Beijing University, at that time, when I presented solely from the Buddhist point of view, and when I give the teachings of the Madhyamika from the pure logical point of view, they didn't want to listen to it. But I think when it comes to writing things in words and publish it on paper, we should be very careful, and we should then make sure that the references are made. And I really feel that making the references and making the footnotes are quite important, because if you were to read a very good paper and a very good book that is well cited and detailedly done with the great citation and extensive citation and footnotes, I think you will learn a lot from it. Anyhow, I want to give the teaching of the 9 examples today. Let's see if I can finish it. So from this rather quite withered and ugly colored lotus, Tathagata dwells ablaze with 1,000 marks. Really beautiful and marvelous looking Tathagata is sitting inside that lotus. So, who could know that there is the Tathagata sitting in the ugly-colored lotus then? It is, in fact, a man endowed with immaculate divine vision, takes it from the shroud of the water-born petals. And such a person would ask people to take off the petals of the lotus, and then you'll be able to see the Tathagata sits ablaze inside the lotus. And the lotus flower over here is as big as the wheels of a cart. It is said that the Tathagata would sit inside the lotus that is as big as the wheel of a cart. And when the lotus is still closed, and because it has thousands of petals, and then when it's blossoming, nobody really notices it. But when it's withering, and then people with divine eye would see it, and then they would say that you should take off the petals, and then the Tathagata would appear inside the Buddha. It is described in the Sukhavati descriptions of aspiration to Sukhavati. It says that if I've made mistakes, if people who made mistakes, and they can only hear the voice of Tathagata, but they would reside within the lotus flower until their karmas are completely burned, they will be able to be reborn in the lotus, reborn as the Tathagata within the lotus flower in the Pure Land. So next one is that likewise the Sugata with his Buddha eye perceive his own true state, even in those who must abide in the hell of direst pain, in the Avicii hell. In fact, look at the sentient beings who suffer so much in the Avicii hell, they still have the Buddha nature. And the Tathagata endowed with compassion, then he relieves those beings from their obscurations. And the Tathagata have such kind of compassion to all sentient beings, just as they have the compassion towards their only child. With such kind of compassion, the Buddha would benefit the sentient beings. And what is the way, or how does the Tathagata benefit the sentient beings then? In fact, it is through the teaching of the Dharma. It is to guide them with wisdom, to guide them to liberation. So let's just contemplate upon this. Even if sentient beings in Avicii hell, in the direst pain, still have the Tathagata Garbha, I think it is quite hopeful for us to look at other sentient beings. In fact, everyone has sentient beings. Even the sentient beings in the Avicii hell have Tathagata Garbha, then every being has Tathagata Garbha. According to the garden of the classics of Dharma gardens with the grove of gems, there's a story that's stated within. It says that a bhikshu who is very good at giving teachings, and at that time, a widow who really enjoys his teaching. She attends his class all the time, and slowly they developed affection towards each other. And then the widow requests of him to get derobed so that they can live together, and this monk did. So he got derobed and started to live as a mundane being, as a lay practitioner. And then he couldn't find any trades except that he can only earn a living through butcher and killing animals and butcher and sell the flesh, sell meat. And then at that time, he met someone. So let's look at this as monastics. You have this opportunity to live a pure lifestyle, and I really advise you do not fall into the traps of getting diverted from this pure path. Otherwise, when you want to get back into the society, you probably lost any skills to live in the society anymore. And then there are people who got derobed they feel that they can no longer survive in the society, and there are lots of problems happen in their family life, lots of fights and lots of disharmony within family. And at that time, it would be rather too late for them to miss the monastic life. But sometimes it could be just pushed by, it could be just a manifestation of a maturation of their karma. Anyhow, this monk, this particular monk in the story, he chose the trade of killing sheep and sell lamb, sell veal. And he was then covered with blood, and instead of wearing robes that he used to, his clothing are tinted with blood and smells really bloody and disgusting. When the monk came by and saw him like that, the monk thought to himself that how pitiful that this person is living like this now. And then this monk thought to himself that he should not scold him, otherwise this person would suffer even more. Therefore, he said that, well, I really like how you weigh the meat. You're very skilled at this. And then the monk, the butcher, who was a monk before, he at that time all of a sudden remembered the sutras that he read before, and how in the sutras it describes the different kind of sufferings of mundane life. And he thought to himself, no, I can no longer endure this kind of lifestyle anymore. I have to get ordained again. I have to become a monastic again. And he continued to practice in a monastic lifestyle, and then attained arhathood at the end. Sometimes it is because of the environment, sometimes it is because of the karma, sometimes people halfway through would act with great evil deeds. However, the kindness and the seed of merits and the seed of Tadagarbha would eventually be matured. It is only sometimes such kind of maturation is brought by great teachers or kind practitioners. And next one is both combined. To combine the previous two stanzas, it says that once his divine eye sees the Sugata abiding within the closed ugly lotus, the man cuts the petals, seeing the perfect Buddha nature within beings. Obscured by the shroud of desire, hatred, and other mental poisons, the Muni does likewise, and through his compassion defeats all their veils. So through taking off all the withered petals, you'll be able to see the perfect Buddha nature within all beings. You'll be able to see the perfect Sugata within all beings. And at that time, all the defilements such as desire, hatred, and other mental poisons will no longer be obscured, will no longer obscure, and the sentient beings and the Sugata will be able to then, through his compassion, defeats all their veils. In the Sugatagarbha Sutra, it is says that It in fact says in the Sugathagarbha Sutra, it states that I see with my Buddha eye that in the bodies of all beings that there lies concealed the Tathagata-garbha, so I expound the Dharma in order to review it. How to review the Tathagata-garbha, in fact, it has to be through the method of expounding the Dharma. Right now, the Sugata is concealed within this withered and ugly-looking lotus. You should see everyone as such, that within all sentient beings, within the closed lotus flower, every sentient being has the Sugata-garbha within. And by giving the teaching of Tathagata-garbha, in fact, the merit is great. It's quite important to expound the teachings of Tathagata-garbha. I remembered that there was a teaching which says that the teaching of Tathagata-garbha, the merit comes from the teaching of Tathagata-garbha surpasses all of those teachings of the Four Truth and so on. So that's the first example. And now the second example is the honey that is surrounded by a swarm of bees. So the bees would then surround the honey which is quite nutritious and really delicious. But how can you get the honey without getting how could you then get the honey through skillful means and pass all the swarms of bees? Then I think there are people who the beekeepers, in fact, they are quite skillful in terms of getting the honey. They either use smoke to get the honey, or they would wear different gears, such as a mask that is made with the nets. I remember a story that when I was young, I went herding yaks with my younger brother, and usually our schedule goes such as in the morning around 7 a.m. or so we would then go out and we will come back home at around 7 or 8 p.m. So we would get really hungry around the afternoon. I remember that once we saw there was a patch of blue flowers, and right around the flowers there's a beehive, and we all wanted to get some of the some honey from the hive. So we used some branches and tried to get rid of the bees. And at first it seems like it was working, but after a little while, a whole swarm of bees started to chase after us, and they started to sting us. And then at that time we got lots of stings, and our whole face were all swollen up. I think it was 30 or 40 years ago. So I asked my younger brother to tell the story, and the story that he told is very similar to how I remembered it too. In Tibet and in Africa, I saw lots of beehives. When I went to Africa, I saw that I saw that there are lots of honey-made products over there. Bees are the architects of the insects. They're very good at making hives, and their hives that they make are very beautiful. and they would hide the honey inside of the hive compartments, and the human beings would then steal all of their results of the hard work. Anyhow, over here it says that you can see the swarms of bees, but you cannot see the honey yet. So over here it says that upon seeing that there is honey among the bees, a capable and skillful beekeeper whose aim is to get the honey makes use of suitable meaning, letting smoke rise and so on. He completely separates the honey from the host of bees and produces the honey. Now, likewise, when his eye of omniscience sees the honey-like elements of awareness, the great sage, over here, great sage does not refer to the kind of great spirits that is usually worshipped in the northeastern part of China. The great sage causes its bee-like veils to be fully and radically abandoned. The ones with wisdom and the skills, they will be able to scatter all the bees and will eventually get the honey. That is the Tathagata Garbha. And in terms of combination, it may sound a little bit similar to lots of your years, but it's only that you're studying it at the first time, and later on when you could get into it more and study it with more depth, you'll be able to see how the three aspects are different, and they are talking about the example from different angles. So aiming to get honey that is obscured by millions and millions of honeybees, the beekeeper disperses all these bees and procures the honey just as he wishes. Some of the honey hives are on the trees, some of them are on the rocks, and sometimes the people would sell it around the roadside. Anyhow, after the beekeeper gets the honey, then they can then also share that honey with others, just as using honey in different kinds of medicine and so on. So in terms of its meaning, then it shows that, in fact, all sentient beings have this undefiled wisdom, and that is just like the honey that is swarmed by the bees. But the swarms of bees do not allow people to get the honey so easily, except the beekeepers who are very skillful and could use lots of tools and different skillful means to get the honey. I also heard that the beekeepers won't get stinged by the bees because the bees already are very familiarized with them. Similarly, over here, what it means is that, in fact, the Buddha nature could be reviewed by the Sugata with great skillful means. In the Tathagata Garbha Sutra, it then says that for the sake of all beings, I expound the true Dharma with skillful means, removing the bees of kleshas, revealing the Tathagata Garbha. The bees, which points to the kleshas, and the honey shows that they are the true Tathagata Garbha, the Buddha nature. So when you look at honey, I think that's the time you should contemplate upon the Buddha nature instead of thinking about how sweet and how delicious. The other day, when we were studying Lama Shabkar's teaching of the flight of the Garuda, he thinks of his teacher and the supreme Dharma, whatever he sees, the ocean, the mountain, and so on. They will use all of these to all of those as analogy to describe the Dharma or his teacher. So we should learn from Lama Shabkar and think about the Dharma and the Dharma. So next one is the third example, where it says that a grain, when still in its husk, it is within a shell. Some bigger seeds or fruits, such as peanuts or walnut or sunflower seed, and barley, as well as wheat, and all of those, they all have shells or husks. There are the shells which are extremely difficult to open and very hard and inedible. Nowadays, there's the all bran grains, which are renowned for its nutritions. But what it shows over here is that it's a husks that is inedible. And this kind of inedible part cannot be consumed by human beings, and is not fit to be eaten by man. Those seeking food and substance and sustenance remove this grain from its husk. You should not then eat the sunflower seed with its husk and consume the husk. That's what it means. If you were to just eat it one by one, it tastes really nice, isn't it? And by its meaning, it says that the nature of the victorious ones which is present within beings, mixed with the defilement of the poisons, is similar to this, while it is not freed from beings mingled with the pollution of these afflictions. The deeds of the victor will not be displayed in the three realms of existence. So the afflictions are already defiling, are having pollutions, creating pollutions. And this kind of pollutions are covering up the essence that is the grain. And with such kind of defilement, then the nature of the true face of Buddha nature cannot display. And if the true face of the Buddha nature cannot be displayed, then all these kinds of functions and merits cannot be displayed and cannot benefit sentient beings in such a way. But we should also contemplate in such a way that if we were to have a thinner layer of husk, then we can benefit sentient beings still. But there are people who have extreme difficult or extremely thick shells as their husks, or the ones who have the husks that develops even harder and harder. Then it would be difficult to ask these kind of beings to benefit others. And there are sentient beings who have a rather thin layer of a husk that is as thin as a piece of paper, and simply through the pointing out instructions of the teacher, their husk will be then it would be easily to break their husk, and they can attain enlightenment very swiftly. So it's quite In fact, whenever you're eating walnuts,
啊，海淘，我们吃海淘的是，
when we eat walnuts, we have to use different kind of tools to break the shells of walnuts so that we can eat the nuts inside. And we have to be very careful, at the same time very persistent in breaking the shells so that it won't break the nuts inside when it finally gets opened up. I contemplate on myself that there are people who listen to the Vajrayana teaching and the Supreme Dharma, and then their shells of afflictions would be easily to be broken and cut through. And in such a way, their potentials of benefiting sentient beings and the activities of benefiting sentient beings will be easily displayed. If it doesn't display, it just shows that their shells are not completely broken yet. So unthreshed grains of rice, buckwheat, or barley, which not having emerged from their husks, still have a husk and beard, cannot be turned into delicious food that is palatable for men. Likewise, the Lord of Qualities is present within all beings, but his body is not liberated from the shroud of the poisons. Thus, his body cannot bestow the joyous taste of Dharma upon sentient beings stricken by the famine of their afflictions. There are then the sentient beings who will be stricken by the famine of afflictions, and in such a way they cannot enjoy the delicious taste of the joy of sacred Dharma. What it means is that the sentient beings who had not who's not departed from the afflictions, the famine of afflictions, and then whatever kind of joy of sacred Dharma cannot be bestowed to them. I think this is the easier way of understanding it. Just as people who had not attained enlightenment, they still have afflictions themselves, and then they cannot bestow the sacred Dharma to others and spread the joy of such kind of activity. And the sentient beings are under the suffering of famine, and they cannot receive the Dharma that is bestowed by the Tathagata. And maybe they're not able to receive such kind of bestowing of the Dharma because they're very much covered by their karmic obscurations. Though the Dharma that is taught by the Tathagata is supreme, but because of their husk of afflictions are still very stiff and hardened, they cannot receive the delicious teachings that is taught by the Tathagata. Majority of the commentaries, in fact, they did not give detailed teachings of this aspect. So we can understand it from the two different perspectives. Anyhow, thus, according to the Tathagata Sutra, it says that I see that all kinds of beings have the Tathagata hidden by kleshas. I preach the removal of those things to enable them to attain universal wisdom. And through the teaching, then the sentient beings can attain liberation. And today we'll stop here.